she whispered. "I was told you need a cook." The widowed rancher saw her daughter behind her. The wind howled through the cracks in the wooden walls, carrying with it the bite of a coming storm. On the slopes above Black Creek, Montana, Ed Monroe sat beside a fading fire, the rifle across his lap more out of habit than need. For years now, no one had dared the trek up to his cabin until tonight. A knock came, soft, uneven, like someone unsure whether to be heard. Ed rose slowly, boots creaking on the pine floor. He moved to the door, eyes narrowing. Another knock, this time firmer, urgent. He lifted the latch and opened it. A woman stood on his porch, coat soaked, eyes dark with fatigue. In one hand, she held a worn canvas bag. In the other, a blackened skillet. "I was told you need a cook," she whispered. Behind her, half hidden in the gloom, stood a girl 7, maybe 8, wrapped in a patchwork shawl. She stepped forward, just enough for the light to touch her face. Ed saw her and froze. Ed didn't move, couldn't. The child's face had shaken something loose in him, something buried deep. She looked nothing like his own daughter had, and maybe that was why it hit so hard. After the railroad shootout took Anna, Ed had shut every door, literal and otherwise. He'd buried his wife on the north slope and rode fence lines that hadn't seen cattle in years. Spoke only to the gelding and the wind. His cabin turned to a shrine. Her apron still hung by the stove. Her comb still lay on the sill. People had come. At first, neighbors, men from town. All sent away with short words or none at all. He'd chosen silence. It hurt less than talking. But tonight, looking at the girl's wide eyes and the woman's trembling shoulders, the silence cracked. "I don't hire anyone," he said hoarsely, starting to close the door. But the woman stepped forward. "I'm Rachel Hart," she said. "And this is Lily. We've nowhere else to go." Ed hesitated, for the first time in years. The woman didn't flinch as Ed studied her. Rain dripped from her lashes. Her hand rested protectively on the girl's shoulder. "I don't want charity," Rachel said. "I can cook, clean, mend, whatever needs doing." "I didn't ask what you could do," Ed replied, his voice low. But she was already reading him. Not the way a con would. No glint in her eye, no sweetening of words. Just a mother weighing his silence like a stone in her pocket. "We need quiet," she said. "And time." The child, Lily, shifted closer to her, holding tight to the skillet as if it were a shield. Ed looked at her again, and for a brief second, he saw a flicker of what had been lost. The way children still believed in safety. "Where's your husband?" he asked. Rachel met his gaze, steady. "Dead. 3 months ago. He was not the kind of man who'd die gently." It said nothing. They all carried ghosts. Some screamed louder than others. Finally, he stepped aside. "One night," he said. "Food. Warmth. That's it." Rachel gave a short nod. Lily said nothing, just looked once more at Ed before stepping inside. Rachel moved like someone who knew kitchens, even ones not her own. Within minutes, fire crackled again, pots rattled, and the smell of cornbread and stew began to push back the cold. Ed watched from the far side of the room, leaning against the doorway to his study. He hadn't lit that stove in weeks. Strange how fast the cabin turned warm with company, even uninvited. Lily didn't speak, but she wandered. First to the window, then to the shelf with the carved horse figurines Anna had made long ago. Her fingers didn't touch, just hovered. When dinner was done, Rachel served it without asking permission. She placed a bowl before Ed, one before Lily, and sat across from them. "Eat," she said simply. The meal was quiet, save the sounds of chewing and storm wind against the eaves. When Lily finished, her eyes drooped. Ed noticed her staring at the old rocking chair beside the fireplace, the same one Anna used to sit in, mending shirts and humming. He almost stopped her, almost said no. But Lily climbed in, curled up with knees to her chest, and fell asleep. Ed stood slowly. From the corner chest, he took the wool blanket folded beneath his rifle. He walked over, covered her carefully, and returned to his spot. Rachel watched, said nothing. Later, When the girl was asleep and the wind had settled to a breath, Ed finally asked, "What's coming after you?" Rachel didn't pretend. "A man named Curtis Pike. He says he's Lily's uncle. Has a paper that says she belongs to him. But she doesn't." "Is he blood?" "No," her voice was hard. "He married my sister. Beat her bloody. When she died, he came looking for Lily. Said the girl was valuable. Not loved. Not safe. Just valuable." Ed's jaw tightened. "I went to the sheriff. He shrugged and said it's a family matter. Said the papers looked fine to him. And they're not. They're forged," she said. "I can prove it. But not out there. Not with Pike's money greasing every palm in 3 counties. And you thought I was far enough from the world? I heard about you from an old woman in town. Said you don't talk much, but you don't turn away stray dogs either." Ed almost laughed, but the sound stuck in his throat. "She wrong." "I don't know yet," Rachel said softly. "You letting us stay tonight, that's not nothing. But if Pike finds us here—" He let the silence finish her sentence. "Get some rest," he said instead. "We'll talk tomorrow." Rachel stood. "Thank you." But before she turned, Ed added, "If that man shows up, I'll want to see those papers." "I've got them," she said. "And I've got the truth. But sometimes truth ain't enough." She stepped into the back room and closed the door quietly. Ed sat for a long time beside the sleeping girl, listening to the pop of firewood and the sound of distant thunder. Something told him he hadn't just taken in a cook and a child. He'd taken sides. Ed rose early the next morning, long before the sun broke over the ridge. The air outside held the hush of winter waiting, and snow lingered in the clouds above Black Creek. He moved through the cabin quietly, but not quietly enough. Rachel was already in the kitchen, stoking the stove, sleeves rolled up. She glanced at him and said nothing, just nodded once. He returned the nod and reached for his coat. He spent the first hour hauling wood, the second tending to his mare, and the third mending a section of fence he knew hadn't broken. When he came back inside, Lily was up, sitting at the table with a cup between her hands. She didn't speak, but when she looked at him, something had changed. Trust, maybe, or just less fear. Rachel served breakfast without a word, and for a while they were 3 people sharing space, if not stories. But quiet didn't last long. The knock came just before noon. Ed's body stiffened. He glanced toward Rachel, who had gone pale. Lily slid from her chair and stepped behind her mother. Ed grabbed the rifle from above the mantel and moved to the door. A man stood on the porch, thick-set, hat low, coat expensive. Beside him stood another, tall and lean, with a legal folder under one arm. "Mr. Monroe," the first man said smoothly. "Heard you might be in need of help around the place. Figured I'd offer a deal." "I'm not hiring," Ed said flatly. "Maybe not. But I believe you've got something that belongs to me." He stepped aside slightly. "This here's Mr. Anson, court clerk from Missoula. Got documentation says I'm the lawful guardian of one Lily Hart." Ed didn't move. "Rachel." Rachel had stepped forward, Lily tight at her side. "Those papers are lies. His name isn't even Curtis Pike. It's Elias Finch. He married my sister under a different name." The man, Finch, smiled, thin and reptilian. "Names are funny things, aren't they? Like how you used to be Rachel Pike, then decided to rewrite your own story." He handed the folder to Ed. "Go on. Read it. Official signatures, judge's seal. Looks proper, don't it?" Ed flipped through the papers. They were convincing, but something about the seal was off. Slightly smudged, like a rubber stamp pressed too fast. "I don't believe these are real," Ed said. "Don't matter what you believe," Finch said, tone still polite but colder now. "This child belongs to me by law, and you're interfering in a lawful retrieval. Not without a marshal present." "There will be one," Finch said. "Soon as I ride back to town and let him know you're holding a child against her legal guardian." Ed handed the folder back. "Then I'll wait for him." Finch's smile vanished. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "I've seen hard," Ed said quietly. "This ain't it." Finch held his stare for a beat too long, then turned. I'll be back with papers and men. And when I come, you better be ready to explain why you kidnapped a child. They rode off in a cloud of dust and threat. Inside, Rachel was shaking. He'll be back with someone who'll sign anything he puts in front of them. I know, Ed said. He laid the rifle on the table and picked up the folder again. These seals, they're wrong. Too shallow, ink too fresh. I know a man in town, lawyer named Thorne, honest as bedrock. If I can get this to him, but you'd have to ride into town. Yeah, and leave you here. Rachel took a breath. Do it. If we can prove these are fake. If the law's still got one good man, we might have a chance. Ed saddled up and rode out by mid-afternoon, pushing his mare hard down the mountain trail. Black Creek's roads twisted with ice, but he didn't slow. In town, he found Thorne in his office, eating supper from a tin plate. The lawyer took one look at the documents and frowned. These are forgeries. Bad ones, but good enough to fool a sheriff with a price on his opinion. Can you do anything? Ed asked. I can file for temporary guardianship under Emergency Protective Clause. Give you legal standing for 72 hours. But you'll need a statement from Rachel and any evidence of the abuse. I'll get it. Thorne stood. You've got until sundown tomorrow. After that, Pike Finch will be back with whoever he paid off. And this becomes a court matter. In his court. Ed returned to the ranch just past midnight, wind biting through his coat. Rachel was waiting at the table. She handed him a folded bundle. Letters from her sister, written before her death. Descriptions of Finch's violence. Warnings to keep Lily safe. These will help, Ed said. The next morning they rode together, Ed, Rachel, and Lily back to town. Thorne met them at the courthouse, papers already in hand. At the hearing, Rachel stood tall, spoke clearly, gave testimony without flinching. When Thorne submitted the letters and pointed out the forged seals, the judge, an old man who remembered Ed from years back, nodded slowly. I'll grant emergency guardianship to Mr. Monroe, he said, pending full investigation. Finch stood, red-faced, protesting. You'll regret this. No, the judge said, unmoved. You might. Outside the courthouse, Finch glared at Ed. This isn't over, he hissed. Ed didn't reply. He just placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. They returned to the ranch that evening. Rachel cooked supper. Lily sat in the rocker again, the blanket pulled tight around her legs. Ed leaned against the doorframe, watching them. For years, he'd lived with ghosts. Now the house held voices again. Soft, real, alive. He still didn't know if he'd made the right choice. But for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone. The following week passed in uneasy calm. Ed repaired the porch roof. Rachel stitched curtains for the kitchen window. Lily began a garden, poking seeds into thawing soil with more hope than horticulture. But none of them truly believed it would last. Not while Finch still walked free. He didn't come in the daylight. He came at night. It began with small things. A dead chicken at the edge of the yard, fence wire slashed, hoofprints near the barn that didn't belong to Ed's mare. Then came the letter, nailed to the door while they slept. You have what isn't yours. Last chance. Rachel read it, lips pressed tight. Ed burned it in the stove without a word. 2 days later, Finch returned in person. He didn't knock this time. Ed heard the horses first. 4 of them, maybe 5. He stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, just as Finch dismounted. This time, the man wasn't alone. 3 others climbed down behind him, hired men, rough-faced and armed. One carried a badge, though it looked like it hadn't seen honest use in years. Finch held out a folded paper. Legal custody, he said. Stamped and sealed. Ed didn't move. Judge Harlan already gave temporary guardianship to me. Different judge, Finch replied smoothly. Different county. This one outranks yours. Rachel appeared in the doorway behind Ed, Lily clutching her dress. You bring a child into this? She said bitterly. I'm bringing her home, Finch answered. To where she belongs. She belongs nowhere near you. The deputy stepped forward. You can hand the girl over, Mr. Monroe, or we can arrest you for obstruction. Ed looked at the badge. You're not a county deputy. I am in this county. You have a warrant? The man's eyes flickered. Don't need one. This is a custody issue. Then it stays with the court, Ed said. He raised the rifle slightly, not enough to threaten, just enough to remind. You want her? Bring the law. Not thugs and fake stamps. Finch's smile curdled. You're digging your own grave, Monroe. Ed didn't blink. Then best be sure it fits you too. That night, Ed doubled the locks on every door. He sat up with the rifle across his lap, boots still on. Rachel tried to sleep but gave up after midnight. She sat across from him in the quiet, each of them listening for hoofbeats. Around 2 in the morning, Lily came out of the back room. You don't have to protect me all night, she said softly. Ed looked at her. Yes, I do. She walked over, climbed into the rocker, and curled up without a word. After a moment, Rachel pulled a second blanket around her. I never thought we'd find someone who'd stand up to him, Rachel whispered. I didn't either, Ed admitted. By week's end, Finch had filed formal accusations in 3 counties. Rumors spread that Ed Monroe had stolen a child, that he'd killed the real guardian, that Rachel was a wanted fugitive. People in town stopped making eye contact. The grocer pretended not to hear Ed's order. The blacksmith, who'd once shared whiskey with him, crossed the street to avoid him. But then, something strange happened. A woman named Hattie Bell, widow, mother of 5, showed up at the ranch with a basket of preserves. Your girl gave my youngest her scarf last winter, she said. Said she didn't want to see her cold. She looked Rachel straight in the eye. Any child who shows that kind of heart, she's worth fighting for. She left the basket on the porch and rode off. The next day, 2 boys came by, sons of the carpenter, offering to help patch the barn roof. When Ed asked why, they shrugged. She gave us water during the fire last fall. Our folks remember. More came. A loaf of bread, a sack of potatoes, a lantern with a new wick. No one said it loud, but the town was remembering. Still, the pressure mounted. Finch returned again, this time with 6 men, one of them a lawyer with a stamped document. Final order of guardianship, he declared. Signed yesterday. Lily comes with us. Ed didn't even look at the paper. You forged the last one. Probably forged this too. The lawyer scoffed. You'll be arrested. Then arrest me. Rachel stepped forward, face pale but voice steady. You're not touching her. Behind them, a quiet rumble rose. Hoofbeats. It turned. 5 riders were coming from the other road, townsfolk. Hattie Bell led them. The blacksmith, the carpenter, even the sheriff, coat unbuttoned, rifle strapped to the saddle. They dismounted slowly. The sheriff spoke first. We've had enough of your lies, Finch. Enough of your papers and hired guns. We know Rachel. We know that girl. And we know Ed Monroe. You want to fight a whole town? Try it. Finch looked around. His men shifted uneasily. You don't want to do this, he hissed. The sheriff stepped forward. You're right. We want to go home. But not until you ride out and stay out. Finch hesitated, then mounted his horse. His men followed. The lawyer sputtered protest, but no one listened. As they disappeared down the trail, silence fell over the ranch. Ed let out a long breath. Rachel leaned into the doorframe behind him, one hand pressed to her chest. Inside the cabin, Lily peeked out the window, her face half lit with wonder. Why did they help us? She asked. Because they finally saw what matters, Ed said. That night, the wind carried warmth instead of threat. For the first time in months, Ed unlatched the front door and left it open for the breeze. In the garden, Lily placed 3 small stones in a circle. For Mama, she said. For Aunt Rachel. And for you, Mr. Ed. He didn't know what to say, so he just stood there quiet, but not alone. Spring came in slow waves that year, melting the last of Black Creek snow beneath warm rains and shy sunlight. The silence around Ed's ranch had changed. Not empty anymore, but watchful, waiting. Then, on the morning of the equinox, a rider came from town. It was Thorne, the lawyer, his satchel tied tight and his expression unreadable. Rachel stood beside Ed as Thorne dismounted. dust trailing behind him like a flag of consequence. Lily peeked from behind the curtain, silent. "It's done," Thorne said. "The judge ruled the previous custody claims null. Declared them fraudulent." Ed's jaw tightened. "And Lily?" Thorne smiled faintly. "The court has named you her legal guardian." Rachel gasped. Lily stepped out slowly, her eyes wide. Ed looked to Thorne. "Rachel, too. She gave consent. You're listed as co-guardian. Both of you. Full rights. And Finch?" Thorne's face darkened. "Arrested this morning. Someone in the sheriff's office finally came forward. The forgeries, the bribery. It all came out." Ed exhaled. Thorne handed him the stamped envelope. The seal shimmered like a sunrise. "You did right by her, Monroe. By both of them." As Thorne rode off, Ed stood on the porch, the paper in his hand feeling heavier than any rifle he'd ever held. Behind him, Rachel stepped close. "You don't have to keep doing this," she said softly. "I know," Ed said, "but I want to." Word spread fast. By nightfall, the townspeople came again. Not in anger or fear, but with food, flowers, small gifts. They didn't speak much, just placed items by the fence. A lantern, a pie, carved wooden horse. Little gestures, big meaning. Lily helped hang the lanterns, her small fingers threading wire through with slats as the sun sank behind the pines. Rachel watched her with quiet pride. Ed stepped back, letting the fireflies and stars mingle in the gathering dusk. Later, Lily sat at the kitchen table, scribbling in her notebook with a tongue between teeth kind of focus. When she finished, she brought the page to Ed. In big, crooked letters, it read, "A house isn't made of wood. It's made of three people who don't give up on each other." Ed read it twice, then looked at the girl. "You write that?" She nodded solemnly. "Well," he said, voice hushed, "I reckon that's the truest thing I've ever read." That night, the ranch glowed. Lanterns hung like stars along the fence line, flickering in the soft wind. Each one a gift, each one a sign, not just of support but of return. A town that had once turned away now turned toward them. Ed sat on the porch, the wood creaking beneath him in the old, familiar way. Rachel stood beside him, arms folded, watching Lily chase the last fireflies across the yard. "Feels like something ended," she said quietly. "But something else began." Ed nodded. "Took me too long to open that door." "Not too long," she said. "Just long enough." A silence settled between them, but it wasn't heavy, just full. Ed glanced sideways. Rachel was looking out toward the trees, the breeze lifting her hair just enough to reveal the scar at her temple. She'd lived through more than she spoke, so had he. He reached out and rested a hand gently on her back. Not possessive, not a promise, just there. Rachel leaned slightly into the touch. They didn't speak again for a long time. Inside, Lily sat by the window, her notebook open, her lantern beside her. She watched the light catch the edges of her handwriting. Her eyes drifted closed, then opened again. She didn't want to sleep. Not just yet. She was listening to the murmur of her aunt's voice, to the silence of Ed's, to the sound of wind through pine and the distant call of an owl. This was what safe felt like. Not silence, not hiding, but this people breathing the same air, anchored by something fragile and real. She wrote one more line beneath her earlier words. "And when it's made right, it stays." Then she closed the notebook. Somewhere beyond the ranch, snow still clung to the north-facing hills. The town would gossip as towns do, but not with cruelty, with memory. They'd remember the man who lived with ghosts and opened his door anyway, the woman who stood her ground when no one else would, the child who reminded them all that some families aren't born, they're chosen. And if anyone rode up that path in years to come, they'd find the same cabin, the same porch, and maybe, just maybe, the same three souls sitting in the quiet, not needing to say a word. Because sometimes the truest peace doesn't come from running away. It comes from standing still together.